All right, we're live. Welcome to School of Fish. Marc Hodulich. How you doing, bud?
I'm well, man. Thanks for having me.
We cleared up some technical difficulties like two entrepreneurs, so that was fun.
Yeah, no panic attacks, but a late start, unfortunately, but we'll be fine.
And obviously, as a tribute to you and your company, I decided to wear, hopefully you can see it, my Build Your Life resume, BYLR sweatshirt. Still one of the best pieces of corporate swag that I
We're gonna
received.
we need to give proper credit though. That's Jesse's company. I was just a small piece of it.
There you go. But maybe for the benefit of the audience, if you could give a little bit of background on kind of your history, both personally and work wise, and kind of where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, very high level. I've always been a runner. Ran college track, moved up to New York right after graduating from Auburn University, and had a host of jobs in consulting. Started my entrepreneurial journey late 2000s, like 2008, and created an events company that went pretty well. Business partner bought me out. Had a company that did not go so well in the event space, kind of a boom bust scenario. And then met my partner Jesse Itzler around 2017, and we started a company called 29029, 29,029 feet. That stands for the height of Mount Everest. And our idea was basically to take everything about endurance events and flip it, make it very approachable to people, but also had it at a very high price point, so you weren't relying off of sponsors to make your margin, and you could really put the customer first. And that company, I'm still running today. We sold that to iFit, the company that owns Nordic Track, a little over a year ago. I'm still serving as CEO and running that business while also a large events business for them as well.
Got it. And when you look back at kind of your up, where are you originally from? Remind me where you grew up.
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay. And then went to Auburn, which is also in Alabama, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
I've become a fan of Auburn through you, and nothing gives me greater pleasure when there's a big Auburn game than texting you or checking in to see how pumped the Hodulik family is around a big
Yeah,
Auburn
for
game.
for better or worse, Auburn gets a lot of national coverage. We seem to not always perform when we get that coverage, so I get a lot of condolences from my friends around the country, but appreciate your support very much.
Yes, coming from New York, there aren't many Auburn fans up here.
That's right.
Uh, but when you were running track, I assume in growing up in high school and then in college, how did you kind of know that that was a sport that really you would excel in or would fit well with your strengths and skill sets?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I played a lot of sports growing up. Played basketball, played soccer, played baseball. But running was something I was doing with my dad. He ran 3 to 4 miles after work every day, and running once a week, then 3 times a week, then wanting to run with him almost every day. It was just good time spent with him. And then we would play ball in the yard afterwards. But he always kind of did his run, and there was minor kind of middle school competitions and stuff that I would do. And, if you win something, it tends to be more fun than if you lose something. And I noticed that I was winning races and I was having more fun doing that than other sports, maybe where I wasn't getting that playing time or getting the accolades that I was starting to get. But I really loved the team component of baseball. So it wasn't until really my sophomore year in high school where we did not have a good baseball team, but I remember making varsity as a sophomore, and the coach basically told me, "You're not going to play. You're like third string second baseman, but you made the varsity team." And I remember thinking like it was more fun winning track races than it would probably be sitting the bench this season. So I ended up running track instead of playing baseball. And there was a good team component in terms of people to train with in track, but not the same as actually playing the games, right? So I would say it was probably that point, 15, 16 years old, where I kind of realized like this is something I want to spend some time on. And then look, in college it wasn't fun. And I got my ass kicked all over the SEC. And you like to think you're a confident person, and I won multiple state titles in high school, and then I'd line up in college and was lining up against 2 Olympians. There's only 3 Olympians for the country in each distance,
Wow.
right? So in the mile, there's only 3 people that represent the mile in the entire country, and one of them was in the SEC. So there's one guy I knew I wasn't going to beat, and and so yeah, I think that was a humbling humbling piece for me, and ended up quitting my junior year and didn't finish, my last 2 years, and just kind of a normal college student for the rest of my time at Auburn, and no regrets about that. I mean, I think I kind of lost the love or passion for it, not just because I wasn't performing well. I think I was just putting too much pressure on myself at the time, right? And it's hard to transition from running to win a race to running to do your best. And that was something that I never really made the transition from very well in college. And it took a lot of maturity into getting like into my 30s before I started thinking that it was okay to run a race and not try to win it. And that led me into ultra endurance sport and things like that, where I've gotten a lot of fulfillment from in the last few years.
Got it. And just for the audience's benefit, what is the PR for the distance? You ran the 1500, if I saw, or you ran multiple
Yeah, I
distances
mean,
in
I
college?
ran 1500. I should have been a 5K person, but anytime my mileage would get up 60, 70 miles a week, I would get stress fractures. So I was a 1500-meter runner, mile equivalent, 412-ish, 413. To be competitive in the SEC, you need to be running a mile equivalent, low fours. And to actually be winning races, you need to be running mid 350s.
Wow.
So, picture me coming around the turn with 110 meters to run and all the other guys have finished, like pretty deflating. And I would be with them with a little over a lap to go, right? With 600 meters, we'd all be together. And then their last lap was their fastest by far. And that would be my slowest lap. So,
Got it.
yeah,
And,
good ego check to go run in the SEC.
and when did it kind of hit you that the love that you had for running or sport would ultimately be something that you do professionally and in many cases as an entrepreneur?
I mean, honestly, it really didn't until it already happened, right? I mean, I'd had other things that I'd forayed into a fundraising and kind of charitable angle technology platform that we built out. I'd done other things. It was just that having an event that actually worked, that was centered a little bit around athletic and sport, my first company, that did involve a little bit of running. It was more of an NFL style combine for professionals, right? Was really what that was. And so there were a few track events in it, but it wasn't until 29 and 29 where, I mean, at the end of the day, what we're doing is endurance hiking. You're hiking up a mountain and taking the gondola down and continuing to repeat it until you climb 29,029 feet. Well, it's not running. It does involve a lot of the same things of being present, being out in nature, having connections with other humans. It's a test of you versus you. You're not really competing against anyone else. You're really just competing against yourself. So I think by just willing to continue to try new things, I found something that really worked and spoke to me, not only on many levels, personally and professionally, but then also, financially it worked. Right. And there's something that comes from that, because I've had some companies in the past where they were centered around things that I loved, but if they're not working financially, you have to really love it to want to continue to do it. And I think those financial struggles can kind of take away from a lot of the enjoyment you get from it. So with 29 out of 29, it kind of blending all of those things that I really like philosophically, the way I try to live my life, and then it actually working financially was the right combination for me to be able to kind of like then take a step back and say, oh, I'm actually doing something I'm passionate about. But it had to have a few of those pieces working in concert together for me to actually be able to take a step back and recognize that.
Got it. And when you look at just general public interest in, let's call it climbing Mount Everest or personal challenges and endurance, right? We've seen a huge rise in what I've read where there's all the Sherpas or the different climbers going with people from around the world to climb Mount Everest. Did you sense that trend was happening and then try and create something that was doable for the everyday person in 29029?
Somewhat, but the way I would frame it is, you had back when this idea really germinated, and Jesse and I were discussing it, 2016, 2017. At the time, you had roughly 500,000 people who did a marathon every year in the United States. 50,000 people do an Ironman. 50,000 out of, I think there's 330 million Americans. 50,000 is very few. And when I signed up to do an Ironman, it's all anybody wanted to talk about was my training, how much time, what am I eating, the distance, the time, it seemed something that was just such a big story. And I didn't even want to be part of the conversation. Just everywhere we went, that's what people wanted to talk about. My wife was just sick of it. And what resonated with me is that everybody really just inherently wants a good story to tell. Everybody has a couple stories where if they're at a dinner party, they know if they tell it right, it lands well no matter the audience. And people want that attention for the most part, unless you're a really big introvert. And I just felt like the story of Ironman, it's too big of a hurdle for people. It's a huge lifestyle change. It's very expensive. There's a lot of equipment. There's just so many hurdles. Having access to a pool, open water swimming. I mean, there's just all these things that I love the brand of Ironman. I champion them for what they do and I had a wonderful experience, but it's not very easy for someone to just say, you know what, I'm going to change my life to get this Ironman story to tell. And what better story to tell than climbing Everest? I mean, everyone can understands Everest and what's the most attainable way to do that. And, I've known of this group in New Zealand that would ride what's called Everesting. And you just take your bike out by yourself, you ride up a hill, and obviously you get to ride down without pedaling, right? And you just keep ascending that hill until you Everest, climb 29,029 feet. And I thought, wow, like, not that many people, unless you're a huge cyclist, want to sit on a bike for 20 something hours and do this. But what an interesting concept that branded properly and promoted the right way is attainable to almost anyone. It's really just a test of will, right? As Jesse would say, it's a grit party. And if you're able to continue to hike and just keep walking, you can do it because you remove a lot of the stresses on the body by taking a gondola down. So the idea was, yes, it was a story to tell. And then it was in what better story to tell than equating something to Everest. People could understand that. People have a really hard time understanding Ironman because swimming 2.4 miles, unless you've actually swam a mile, is really hard to understand how hard and how far that is. Right. Whereas like the next time you're in an airplane, look out the window when you hit 30,000 feet and then think about getting there on your own 2 feet. It actually is something that, even though it's so big and humans have a hard time understanding big numbers, it's actually pretty easy to understand the concept. And I think that really big idea that's easy to understand, and then we made it turnkey for people to go and attempt is a large reason why it's worked.
And when you had the original idea or were ideating it yourself or with Jesse or others, how did you think about actually going from an idea to the execution and or implementation of putting on that event? And how big were you thinking from the beginning of time?
So I'll start with the last question first. We were thinking big from the very beginning. I mean, my initial thought, look, Jesse was a financial partner and an awareness creator, right, with his audience. But I was the business plan, I was the marketing, I was the operations, I was the entrepreneur. I had to do everything, right? And that's why the relationship worked. He did his lane really well, and I did my lane really well. And we both thought really big from the beginning of it being a very big brand, it being a brand first in the community more so than an event. It's never, another logo's never been tied to it. We've never had a sponsor. It's always been positioned as a luxury product is really what I wanted it to be. And a lot of people have asked me what's made me successful. I'll just try things, right? I think the older we get, people get too stuck in their ways and they're not willing to fail. And I think the lesson of me doing Ironman, the first 2 weeks I went to swim class, I couldn't make it 50 yards across the pool. Like I physically knew how to swim, but I would get so tired, even though I was running 40 miles a week, I couldn't make it across the long course without grabbing the side rope. Freestyle, if I did breaststroke or something, I could do it, but I wasn't embarrassed. It was just like, okay, this is part of the process and I'm going to get through it. And with 29, it became something where you had to test it. So I went out with a great friend of mine, Matt Burrell, and former college teammate of mine, and he's worked with me for years, and Jesse and Marc Brown. And did the research and found the most vertical gain in the state of Georgia and a road alongside it and hiked up and had a car take us down. And, you had to do the reps to figure out like, okay, how long of time do we give people? How attainable is this? And then you just really have to go out and try it. And that's finding that product market fit was really tough. We were doing something and pricing it in a way that no one had really done before, right? Most races are priced by the distance or duration. So a 5K is $25 and a marathon's $200. An Ironman's $800. We were starting at a price point of $4,000, but we were including a coach and all of your swag and a place to stay and all of your food and beverage. And no one had done that kind of all-inclusive packaging before. Obviously, they've done it in hotels and retreats and a bunch of other things, but no one had done it with an endurance event that I'd known of. So that was the big fear, was putting something on sale and not knowing if people would find value from it. And obviously they have in tremendous amounts, which has allowed us to expand and grow now to 5 locations and events. But it was really just trying it first.
And then when you look back at how many 29s have you put on in the last, 5+ years or 4+ years,
I mean, it's
roughly?
crazy. It's crazy to say this. We'd actually had sold the business having only produced 5 of them. Because we didn't get to produce any events in 2020 due to the pandemic. And we put on 4 last year. So we put on 9 total as a company.
Got it. And when you look at, and the average attendance is a little over 200 people.
Yeah, 250 people per event.
Right. So assuming that you didn't have too many repeat climbers, even though I know you did, you had over 1,500 people that participated in these events, right? Roughly.
Yep. Yes.
What are some like of the proudest feedbacks or memories from some of the attendees, or the messages you've received that really were in a way life-changing for those people that participated?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say has been life-changing for me to know that an idea that I had in my head and that I've been able to execute with our team and with my partners has had this positive ripple effect for so many people. I think the most inspiring stories to me, and I don't want to get gender specific, but have come from the women who've done the event, who have said really it was the first time that they ever felt like a hero in their household. That it was the husband who was maybe having the big business deal or had done an Ironman or a marathon, and they were always supporting. And then suddenly they were able to flip the script and be like, oh, mom's a badass. Like mom just did 29 out of 29. And it gave them the space to kind of explore them being the star. Those have been huge. And just others who have messaged me years after the event and said, you don't know that every single day I think about that event in some capacity.
Amazing.
Right. And you never get tired of those notes. I feel like, right after an event, it's not shocking to have 250 people do the event and get 20 or 25 handwritten notes or emails, which is a lot for just 10% of the field to kind of take that time to do something. But it's the ones that come then a few months after and then years after where you realize this really resonates. And not only does it resonate, but people are then coming back with their kids or their spouse and wanting to share in this together. That's what's been really touching as well, is not only been what people have actually said to me or written to me in my team, but their actions in terms of whether it's coming back and climbing or those that come back and volunteer. The most precious gift we have and resource we have is our time. And to find people of great levels of affluence choose to spend their weekend volunteering through the night and in really rough conditions, sometimes volunteering to make sure others get that same feeling and get the same experience that they had. That's really what I think has brought this event to the next level, is that sense of community that exists of, I want you to have a better experience than I had. And my experience was a 10 out of 10. And therefore I want to volunteer my time to give that to someone else. That's been really one of the most satisfying things for me to see.
Yeah. And what I've learned from it, I unfortunately have yet to participate in one of the events. I plan on doing so soon enough. But last week, I saw this famous mentalist. We didn't talk about this, so if you don't know, I'm telling you for the first time, named Oz Perlman. You may be familiar with him. He's one of the most famous mentalists in the world, and he also has a passion and love for running and endurance events. And I saw that he was posting that he was attempting to break the Central Park record for most miles run continuously in one day, which is 19 hours because the park opens at 6 a.m. and closes at 1 a.m. So I saw him post this. In my mind, I referenced you and 29 and Jesse, and life experiences, I said to my wife, you know what? I'm going to go check out this event. They
Yeah,
posted on 90th and 5th. They said the team would be stationed there. And I show up at 8:15 in the morning. They had a sign that says world record in progress, 3 laps completed at that point. And I ended up spending the whole day being, to what you're saying, part of the support staff to make that experience for him and ultimately others that read about it online, saw it on social, come together. I played a small part. And I'll just kind of land the plane. I stayed there all day. I took my son to football that night. And I said to my son, I said, Reed, we're going to go back and see him finish the 100 miles, which was his target, at 7:30 at night. We showed back up at the park. They weren't expecting to see us again. And Reed got to see someone accomplishing what I would describe as a
sure.
major feat. It's never been done. All the great athletes, endurance people, no one supposedly has ever run that far in one day. And so I thank you, right? When you talk about the people that attended your events, that's one number. But then all of the offshoot things that come from hearing about what you guys have been able to create as a community. So it's a real life story playing out in the last, couple of days that I wanted to thank you for.
Yeah, no, that's it. First of all, I didn't know that that. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of cool things that people can go and do. But O's couldn't do that without the support staff there, right? So really cool. Good for your son to see that as well. I mean, you just want your kids to be exposed to people trying really hard things, and also humans encouraging other humans, right? There's a probably the best entrepreneur that I know. Fabulous guy, and he says, this is a big cup. We can all drink from it, right? We don't have to have our own cup. We don't have to fight over it. And I think it's nice to show whether it's world record attempt in Central Park, or whether it's a 29:29 or an Ironman. When people are trying really hard and vulnerable, human nature is to want to help. And I think it makes us be our most present and see our best self. And I just want to expose my kids to more and more of that type of behavior, because there's social media can lead to a lot of negativity. And I think being out in nature and seeing people do things like that certainly leaves lasting memories and really good lessons for our kids too.
Totally. And even this podcast, the origin of us meeting was that I was marketed the BYLR course probably 3 to 4 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. And it was Jesse speaking. I said, this guy, I always had seen him at the Knicks games, and he had this ultra passion to the way he communicated. I signed up for the course. It was very good value at the time. It was kind of a no-brainer. And then from that, involvement, you and I connected when you were doing a mastermind group. I think you were screening people that were thinking about joining you for that weekend. I was walking on the street. I said,
Yeah,
you got a yes from me, but just if you could speak to my wife and explain that this is a good
that's right.
decision,
I had a picture wife too. I remember that.
right? And then we spent 3 days together. I got to meet people that are part of your world and org, and that was for me a personal transition time where I'd been doing one thing for so long and just needed to be in a setting that was outside of my comfort zone in a way, a little bit outside the box, to give me the insights and confidence that I could go build an entirely new business, which is the journey that I've been on for the last 3+ years. So while today is definitely a conversation, it's a time to publicly thank people like you for creating things that did have an impact on my own life. So I'm trying to get all sentimental with you today,
Yeah, no, well, thank
right?
you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, thanks to your wife for listening to my probably unrehearsed pitch on closing spouses on attending the
There you go.
mastermind as well.
Yeah, and not checking the checking account in terms of
That's
that
right. That's
luxury
right.
commitment. Because people I've come across have always said to me, you have to spend money sometimes to make money. And in that case, it was spend money to kind of learn something or to be a part of something that was that kicking off point, jumping off point to do a lot of what we're doing today. But Marc, when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, uh, you had words like founder, entrepreneur, investor, and endurance athlete. How do you kind of look at those components of what are important to you? And I know you're a family person as well, but how do those things kind of play well together? Being a founder, being an entrepreneur, investing, and also being, as you've talked about, an endurance athlete.
Well, not to be crass, but that's all just LinkedIn bullshit, right? That's not really how I. It's
Okay.
funny you said
So
you
here's your
said you looked
chance.
at.
Come up with a new profile header of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you said my LinkedIn. I'm like, oh my god, I don't know the last time I updated that, right? Like,
It's good.
I don't even log into LinkedIn anymore. Um, but look, I think that makes me try to sound way more important than I am, right? I'm just someone who's willing to try stuff. I would have never 10 years ago described myself as a creative. I'm a really creative person, and business is a way for me to express my creativity, right? Everything about the 29 of 29 brand was about expressing what I thought the pinnacle of endurance events should look like. And I don't know, it just coincided at such an interesting time in my life where we were building a home. And I also got to display a lot of creativity in terms of the design and how we worked with the architect and other types of things. And so business has just allowed me to explore that and also involve my family. I think that that's been a key thing, is that having different career options and paths to go down, I've always just tried to look at others and see what makes them happy. And I did live in Manhattan for 10 years and had a lot of friends in financial services do unbelievably well financially, but they weren't happy, and they were always chased. Not all of them, some of them found that right balance, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, but a lot of them were kind of chasing things that weren't necessarily making them happy. And the thing is, I've gotten older, the investing piece, I'm not writing a bunch of checks for angel investments all over the place, right? But I do pursue a few things with a lot of focus, because if I get a financial return, that's great. But being involved and helping a company get launched or sit on their board, being part of that discovery process, that brings me happiness, right? And so I think that I've tried to spend more and more of my time doing those types of things and being around the type of people where I think I'm getting the highest and best use of my time and money. And that turns out to not maybe be the best operator, right? I don't necessarily look at myself wanting to be a public company CEO. Um, I like to be able to help mentor and grow other people, but I like having an idea, building a business plan, building a brand, launching it, and then finding someone else to run it and grow and scale it. And with 29, my team has been able to grow a lot into their roles. And I'm not yet ready to give up the reins on 29 to 29. I really love running it. That's why, when we sold the business, one of my non-negotiables, as Jesse would say, was that I had a 3-year employment contract. I just didn't want to give up control to someone else. So I still want to be very close to that business, but those pieces kind of tied together for me. The common thread is how I get the best use or the most joy out of spending my time, right? So the investments that I do are ones that I'm going to get a lot of joy either from learning something new or the people that I'm going to be around. Um, with business, it's really launching and concepting new ideas. And then how do I expose my family to those things? And not have them be too much of a pull on my time, meaning those businesses or those pursuits, if they start to infringe too much on time with my kids and time with my wife, then it really sucks out some of the joy for me, because I feel like my life's getting out of balance.
Got it. And obviously, we've all spent more time than ever during COVID with our families, whether that was circumstance oriented or the nature of what we were all doing. I do feel that what you do probably, is very relatable and understandable to your children, right? In a way, your business is helping other people, right? It's motivating other people. It's creating experiences. And so I'm wondering how your own children have kind of learned a little bit more about their father from a way that he kind of conducts his business and business life on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, really interesting, great question. My kids for a long time probably thought I didn't work, right? And now they think that work is just, my kids are 12 and 10, right? So they're old enough, but now they just think I'm on the phone all day, and they wanted to know who I'm talking to and talking about what. So I've allowed them to join Zooms, and after a little while they'll peter out. Just last week, my 10-year-old's extremely bright with numbers. He's in fourth grade, he's in sixth grade math, he's off the charts when it comes to math, and I just taught him an income statement, a balance sheet, statement of cash flows. And for half an hour, he just went through it. And, were you there?
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah.
Now we're coming back. Yeah.
These are the flags we're purchasing for the finish line, or this is how much it costs to run the gondola. This is the ticket price. These are the cost of goods sold. So once you subtract those two, you get your gross margin. And that was profit to him, right? And so I think it's been very helpful. I was someone who I don't know what's going on. Hold on.
We truly have our first technical challenge. Where's our assistant here?
I'm assuming that you know how to edit, so
No,
I'm
no,
hoping
it's
it doesn't
good.
have to
It's
just my
good. These,
phone die out. But it's been really interesting. I had a very flexible work-life balance before, but it was them being home was a lot of the difference. So I'm in my home office now. We do have an office here, but I work out of home most days and have my team come to the house. And the difference was I was always almost home when they got home from school. The difference was having them home the whole day,
right.
right? And there were some days where my oldest dressed up and came to work with me. He finished his schoolwork and came down to my office and just saw what a work day was like. And that's special because I think what they saw before was just the end product. They got to go to the top of the mountain. They got to hand out red hats. They didn't see everything that went place beforehand. And this last 2 years has allowed them, I think, really to see like how hard my team works throughout the year to just then get to produce 3, 4, 5 of these magical weekends is actually a whole team of people for a year working on it. So I think it just gave them a lot more appreciation for everything that goes into it. Because they just,
Yep.
at the end of the day, got to see like the end of the movie, right?
Right. No, seeing the build up to what you're creating as the finished product is important, particularly for this next generation or multiple generations below us. Even my own son, will pose different business questions, sometimes money oriented. I'm like, asking me how much Jeff Bezos is worth. I'm like, I can't even know how to answer that. That's way above my, answer curve, where I feel comfortable giving a good explanation. But I think the kids, or particularly our kids and others that are building companies and running businesses, are seeing and learning a lot. And when you talk about leading by example, I'm sure your kids, no matter what, see the hard work that someone like you puts in to make something come together. So,
well, I mean, it's connecting those dots. I appreciate that. I make my kids watch Steph Curry, his practice. Like it's great to see him hit the 37-footer from the logo shot. Everyone loves seeing that, but he shot it 1,000 times in practice in the last couple of weeks, right? And so I think it's trying to instill upon them, like, yes, you got to hold my hand and walk across the Leadville 100 finish line with me when I ran the Leadville 100. But do you remember the 6 months of training that went into that? And all those other times, like, you knew I was going for a run, but every single day was building up to that finish line. So I think that's really important now for kids because there's so many highlights for them to see. There's so many success stories. And I think also, the ability to kind of delay your gratification. Everyone wants to be successful right away. And we can always point to, it's so easy to find the best in everything, right? And so I think being able to show our kids that you didn't get to see how many videos Zach King made before he had 30 million followers. I didn't know who Zach King was until he did a 29 and 29, and my kids freaked out because apparently he's got like 50 million YouTube followers. But what an amazing guy. But he worked his ass off for decades before he got to the point where he got discovered in a sense and went viral. And I think it's showing, my kids have been able to see the iteration of my businesses and seeing, the first 1 or 2 years weren't so easy. And even in 2020, having to postpone all of our events, unbelievably challenging and trying time for the business and not knowing if we're ever going to get to produce an event again, to then selling the business within a 12-month span was also good for them. And I feel like a lot of lessons I can teach them later on, just about, trusting the process and going through and believing in what you're doing, but always caring the most. And if you care that much, I believe that most of the time you'll win.
No, I think this was, we covered a lot. I would say I do want to leave with a little bit about what you're doing now with iFit, kind of as your partner or parent company in a way for 29029, and kind of what the year ahead looks like for that division of the company that you're working closely on.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, it's been interesting because I hadn't had a boss in 12 years, and I realized that I'm probably not the best employee. I hope I'm a really good mentor and friend and husband and father, but I'm probably not the best employee anymore. So that's just been an interesting cycle of having someone to report to. And everybody's got a boss, right? No matter who you are, you have a boss. And I think that's been a good notion to go back and get humbled again in that sense. And that there's really good people that I can learn from. And corporate America is much different than, being a small business owner and an entrepreneur. So there's been a good learning curve for me that I've really appreciated. I've worked with some great people. And what I'm doing there is instilling a lot of the things that we've done and expanding it to their audience, right? There's millions of iFit members who have access to all the content on Nordic Track equipment. And it's really taking them from the screen to real life. So if you learned about a beautiful place in Papagayo, Costa Rica, my team will now take you there for an adventure, right? If you learned about Everest Base Camp Trek while on a Nordic Track incline trainer, we're not going to take you to base camp, right? And so those are small adventures called iFit adventures that we're doing. And what's interesting is, again, there though, we're moving really quick and we're bringing products to market very quickly. And you have to find product market fit. So some of the stuff is selling well, some of the stuff is selling phenomenally well, and other stuff isn't selling as well. And I think it's, just not being too afraid to fail, but now knowing that, I have a lot more to own up to in terms of forecasts and revenue projections and profitability. It's been a really good process for me to kind of go through. Now I'm not necessarily playing with my own money. It's someone else's. So the risk reward stakes have changed. And it's a much bigger team I get to play with, which I've really enjoyed. So I think the average tenure of a CEO's company gets acquired is 7 months, according to a lot of YPO studies that I've been in. I'm on 11 months, and I'm feeling really good about the future. So I really like the people. I like the industry, and they've been really supportive of what we're doing and of my team. And I think that's been the main thing, is they've shown a lot of trust in us as experts and given us a lot of bandwidth. And that's just made it a lot easier for us to move quickly and test new things.
All good stuff. So we're going to wrap up here. I know technically we're not achieving our highest levels right now, but Marc, thanks so much for participating. I'm sure we'll find time to do another one, catch up further in the coming months. So appreciate you
Awesome.
being here.
Thanks, Fish. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.